Hi Kingsley, thanks for joining us today. We're here to talk about the NHS's decision to phase out its purchasing and supply agency in favour of the Treasury's OGC buying solutions. I wonder if you could start by telling us what was wrong with the old system and whether this new policy will fix those problems.
Well, the starting point for the work, as I understand it, was a review, an external review done of purchasing and procurement across the Department of Health, which concluded that, or came to the conclusion that the NHS was not making full use of its buying power. So what was a study was undertaken predominantly by Ernst & Young on behalf of the department under Mark Britnell's leadership, which looked at what alternatives there were, and that concluded that the PASA was not as an effective buying route as either devolving to the new commercial support units or in a sense, concentrating the process with the OGC.
Ken Anderson, the former commercial director of the NHS, has described the new policy as akin to moving deck chairs on the Titanic. Do you think this is fair? Is it just change for change's sake? Ken's
always got a good phrase for these things. I think it's slightly unfair. One of the problems is, which is very difficult for people outside the NHS to fully understand, is that there is an assumption in many parts of government that the NHS is some form of homogenous entity, that actually it should be possible to tell foundation trusts and PCTs essentially what they should do with their procurement. And it simply doesn't work like that, of course. Foundation trusts are statutory independent bodies, and many of them will make decisions which may appear to a centralist procurement body to be counterintuitive. So there's been a history in the NHS of the DH and others leading on centralised framework contracts, purchasing and procurements, which have then not fulfilled their volumes because of this inability to effectively corral the NHS to actually follow instructions, if you like. So to that extent, it's not absolutely clear that the NHS will make more use of the major central government contracts by virtue of being with the OGC than they did when they were with PASA. So in that sense, Ken is suggesting, quite rightly I suspect, that the outcome may not be as significant as was hoped.
Under the new plans, the independent sector will be able to compete to sell its commissioning advice and services directly to PCTs. How does that differ from FESC?
The origins of that role for the CSUs was a recognition that within primary care trusts, in PCTs, 151 of them, there is a relatively paucity of capability and capacity on commercial issues. And as we move towards a more plural supply side, and as contracts become much more specific and legally binding for FTs, for example, there was a sense that 150 trusts PCTs simply didn't have the commercial capability, and therefore one of the additional roles that were given to the reform procurement hubs was this notion of giving commercial support to PCTs. The notion of FESC is slightly different. FESC is not about consulting contracts. FESC is about service contracts. So it's actually about external providers taking over functions or supporting key...
But it does have consultants such as Tribal on the framework.
Yes, but it's not used for procuring consulting, see. I mean, we supply through FESC a series of commissioning services to a range of PCTs, but FESC itself is not designed, and indeed most of the suppliers don't provide consultancy services, they provide services. So there is a distinction. The extent to which the CSUs will be effective in providing external advice to PCTs, I think, is open for question. Firstly, they've got to be able to recruit the people with the right expertise and knowledge, and there's a tremendous dearth of commercial expertise in the health industry generally. I mean, a number of people understand the contracting and procurement relationships around clinical services within the NHS are very few and far between. So the CSUs will have to find those people, and that's going to be difficult. Then they've got to persuade PCTs, and ultimately PCTs are going to have to be prepared to pay for this, because after year one, the CSUs are going to have to find a funding model, and the PCTs are going to have to consider whether or not they believe the CSUs are the best place to provide that level of support.
Do you think the effect of this new policy will be to invigorate the market, or do you think it will be more of the same for the private sector?
I doubt the CSUs are going to have very much impact on the pace at which new suppliers are prepared to enter the market. I don't really think that the provision of better advice in itself is going to encourage many new entrants into a market which is at the moment perceived by the independent sector as being relatively difficult, very difficult indeed in some cases, very difficult to penetrate, and not desperately profitable for them.